My name is Sybil Rhodes. I'm a university professor. I'm chair of the Department of Political and Juridical Studies at the University of CEMA in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I'm also the president of CADAL, a think tank and NGO dedicated to openness and democracy in Latin America. And we're also based in Buenos Aires. I think there are two reasons why it's difficult for countries to have openly cooperative and liberal immigration policies, especially in terms of what we might call a refugee crisis. The first reason is just has to do with national politics. As we've seen all over the world, it can sometimes be a thorny issue in especially in democratic countries. Because there is a basic aspect of democracy that has to do with majoritarianism, what the majority of the public wants. And sometimes publics probably may not want as high immigration levels as would be necessary or desirable from a humanitarian point of view. That problem is not absolute. It certainly doesn't have to be that way, but it can be related to national politics. Usually, wealthy democracies, for example, don't necessarily want a whole lot of migrants unless they have a disequilibrium in their labor market. And politically it can be difficult. So national politics, national policies are one problem. The second problem has to do with the nature of making any kind of international deal. Multilateral cooperation can be difficult, and in an area like migration, especially humanitarian migration, it can often seem like the negotiating conditions aren't equal. One country has more incentive to want open cooperation than another would, given the way national politics tend to work. So it's harder to find that win-win area where countries think that everybody's getting a good deal out of cooperating. I would say that both of these can be difficult. I don't think they're impossible to overcome, but because of national politics and because of inherent asymmetries between countries, cooperation and migration is especially difficult. I think that in a certain way there has been a kind of loose, perhaps not formal, it's not formal multilateral cooperation so much as a coordination of policies to deal with the outflows of Venezuelans in the last few years. A number of countries have, in their own way, facilitated the entry and the legalization of Venezuelans in a variety of ways, from not requiring certain updates on passports, recognizing passports that have expired, providing other, getting rid of other bureaucratic barriers. So in that sense, countries have been able to benefit from the existing travel regime that existed. That is, it was easier for Venezuelans to travel to other Central American, to other South American countries in a way that is not as, it's much easier in general. The visa requirements are practically non-existent. So even by just leaving that in place, countries were facilitating Venezuelan migration to some degree. it hasn't been possible to come to some kind of formal agreement like the burden sharing for refugees that we saw in the European Union. But since that fell apart rather quickly, perhaps in South America, what we've seen actually isn't too bad. Well, I'll first say that I really think it's shameful to use the deliberate separation of families, especially small children, from their parents, as a way of sending a signal to people that they shouldn't migrate. I just think that's a shameful thing to do. I don't think that the United States should be doing that. I don't think it's necessary. I think it brings out the worst in people. It's really a shameful thing. Now, in general, I do believe it's necessary to find some kind of orderly way to process a migration, among other things, because I think it's a natural human tendency to see what we might call disorder, or to become frightened when it looks like things have gotten out of control and the authorities can't handle it. In that sense, it's not surprising that when, for example, the media drew attention to the large caravans and so on, that exist in part because for people to travel together is much safer than to travel in smaller groups. But seeing that those images, while it might bring out feelings of compassion and heroism in some people, it just makes other people frustrated and upset. And I think this is a dynamic that we have to acknowledge. There has to be some kind of solution found in a political democracy that will hopefully allow countries to be open to benefit from immigration, to provide a humanitarian cover, shelter, refuge to people who need it, but also to provide citizens of a country some kind of sense of order. I think that with creativity, with dedication, there are ways to find that, to avoid the cruelties we've seen recently, to find solutions that will be feasible in the long term in democratic polities, but also avoid deliberate cruelty.